Hey, a bunch of weirdos. Welcome to the first episode of what I'm calling the Guitdiot Sessions. So, I asked a few of you to write in your questions or comment with your questions, anything that you had that you wanted to talk about. Got a few, and there's one that directly relates to what I was going to kind of start off this series with, was basically some recording and writing a song, and kind of the process that I go through, starting from scratch. So Colby, my good friend from Texas, asked, "What is your style of songwriting?" and asked, "Does it take you a while to write lyrics?" So my main style of songwriting is basically to kind of let as much as I can it come to me as opposed to trying to force it. There is work that's put into it, but when it starts to feel forced as I'm going through a songwriting session, um, then that's when I kind of back off of it and step away. As far as the general process, everything's kind of done in parts. So it almost always is going to start with the guitar riff. So the riff is the most important part, in my opinion. Um, so that comes about really just in practice sessions for guitar playing, or even if I'm just kind of noodling around on the guitar, I'll start to play a riff or start to play a combination of things, and it'll kind of develop itself into something that I feel will work, as kind of either, it's either catchy or cool or something I can kind of build off of. So um, just to go into it and start to get into the meat of it as far as how I record. I've got everything set up here to record what I have as far as um, this this new riff that I have. So this will become the building blocks of a new song. So um, go ahead and I'll play you the riff so you can hear it, and then I'll show you kind of how it's laid down in the recording session, and then we'll kind of keep going from there. So the riff I came up with, and a lot of the riffs that I'm writing recently they're kind of pushing more of my blues influence into like a blues rock style or a blues hard rock style. Whereas my initial recordings, the Dear Today record, and the subsequent singles after that were more strictly hard rock, in my opinion. These are kind of going back to I was raised more on the Texas blues, the Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff, um, and things like that. So for a long time when I was younger, I mainly played, or was really into more of blues playing and blues rock playing. Played in a blues cover band, things like that. So that's one of the big influential styles, and it's kind of been really, although rock is my main style, blues is always kind of in there. Um, so I decided to start incorporating that a little bit more and bringing a little bit more to the forefront of some of the songs that I've been writing. So the riff that I have is kind of along those lines, and I can show you, after I play this riff, kind of, it's not something that I necessarily thought of at the time, but as I, go into a more of an analysis mode on the actual riff, I can pinpoint what artists I kind of got it from. So the main riff that I came up with the other day, and like I said, this just came out of me kind of sitting down with a guitar and just kind of playing a little bit, and it just kind of comes out depending on what songs I'm playing or practicing or whatever it may be. So it's so I that to me is a good riff that can be used as the beginning of a song. It can also be used throughout the song. It's and really even it could go along. I don't think it's repetitive or catchy enough necessarily for a chorus of a song, but I definitely think that it would be, it's usable for verses. You could really play that all the way up until a chorus. The issue you start to run into there is lyric writing over, a dominant riff like that. So, back to where that kind of came from. So I can tell you there's two different songs that kind of morphed into this riff. So the first one is going to be Pride and Joy, which is a Stevie Ray Vaughan song. And he does a lot of the open E blues stuff. A lot of this stuff during one of the solos during Pride and Joy, he does a so all those notes are within the riff that I just played, the original riff. You can also hear a lot of that in the riff from Cowboys from Hell. All same notes. So it's kind of a mixture. Like I said, it's the hard rock influence that I have, along with the Texas blues influence, is kind of morphed in and is starting to create some riffs like this. Which is kind of a fun direction for me. I like playing both styles. They both are entertaining. You can put a little more expression in the blues music, and you have the technical difficulties of the not difficulties, but technical complexities of the rock music. So as a guitar player, they're really fun styles to play. With that being said, I'd like to move over to one of the other questions that I got, since I did mention Pantera and Stevie Ray Vaughan. So Simon Burrows, he's the owner of Simon Says Music Promotions over in London, and has been really cool as far as sharing independent artists online and sharing other people's music. He's shared some of mine. And just seems like a really cool guy. Him and I have just recently started interacting. He asked, not counting greatest hits or compilations, what are your favorite 5 albums of all time? It's a tough question. So I actually tried to think about it, because there's so many. So I took my 5 favorite albums as far as ones that I can listen to the majority of the songs and not get tired. So what albums do I have the fewest skip this songs on? So they're going to be, starting with number 5 is going to be Seether, Disclaimer, which I believe was an early 2000s thing. Seether's one of my favorite bands. Really great songwriting, grooves, catchiness. I love the style of all the musicians in that band, the drums, bass, the guitar playing, and then obviously the vocals are really great. So I grew up in the 90s, so the grunge undertones of Seether really are, I feel like I connect with those. Number 4, Chevelle, This Type of Thinking. Chevelle has so many great records and songs. Again, another one of my favorite bands. This Type of Thinking, I remember working in a music store when I was younger, and there was a CD player set up, so we basically would have music on, playing all day. And I remember having This Type of Thinking record on, and it was something that we would have in the record store playing, or the music store playing all day, and I would never get tired of it. So like I said, a lot of good stuff that Chevelle does, but that's going to be my number 4 favorite. Number 3 is Joe Satriani. Now, Joe Satriani is my favorite guitar player of all time, and a lot of folks would probably, as far as their best Satriani album goes, they would probably say, his early stuff like Surfing with the Alien and things like that. Also great records. The very first Satriani record that I got and listened to is called Crystal Planet, and So that one is my third all-time favorite because that's what kind of introduced me to Joe Satriani, and that's another record that I can listen all the way through. Number 2 is Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. So again, a product of the 90s. Pantera, being from Texas, all those types of things, but they were, I really loved the whole, first of all, I thought the album cover was, I think it's hilarious. Pantera did that, outside, I mean, everybody knows what they're outside of music, what they're famous for, but I think the one of the cool things that Pantera did was, these metal guys, and rock guys in general are supposed to have this tough guy type of persona in a lot of cases. And if you know musicians, or if you know rock musicians or metal musicians, you'll know that a lot of them are not that way. Off stage or off interview or things like that. A lot of them are really sensitive folks and stuff like that. Pantera, I think, was super honest, and the album cover to me kind of showed their funny side, like they're, hey, we're badass, we're a bunch of badasses who can play really well and make this really great music. But we also have a sense of humor, and we like to have fun, and that was kind of a cool thing, I thought. But then aside from that, obviously, is going to be all the great songs that are on Cowboys from Hell. Number 1 is Stevie Ray Vaughan's Texas Flood. So again, like I said, I grew up really into a lot of the blues stuff, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was my main, I guess, blues go-to. It was, and a lot of getting into the blues. You think as as a kid, and like I said, I grew up in the '90s. It wasn't during the blues boom of the '80s or the one they had in the '60s, but I think I started getting into older classic rock when I started listening to Hendrix, and then you start to listen to all the people that Hendrix influenced, and Stevie Ray Vaughan obviously is one of those. Joe Satriani is another one. Those types of things, but the Texas Flood album is just a really cool blues album to me. It was prior to, because Stevie Ray Vaughan went through kind of those ups and downs, in his personal life, and it kind of weighed on the music a little bit. And not that all his other albums weren't great, but I think the Texas Flood one was the strongest one. The instrumentals on Texas Flood are some of the best. Rude Mood is one of my favorite songs, and that one's just really cool. So honorable mentions on favorite albums that didn't hit the top 5 is Nirvana's Nevermind. I didn't put that in the top 5 because I feel like it's too obvious. Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? That one didn't make the top 5 because a lot of it's super weird to me. Really cool songs on there, Hey Joe and Purple Haze and stuff like that, but all the other stuff I can do without. Metallica, and don't get mad at me on this one, I really like the Load album. And that's because I feel like after the Black Album, and they were more mainstream, I thought it was cool to see their songwriting and try to adapt and change to the environment, as opposed to just hammering away doing the same kind of thing that they had been doing. And also, again, being a blues rock guy, it was, the more blues-based riffs was cool to me. Not that I don't love the thrash albums, or the early thrash stuff, all their early stuff, and all their stuff they've been doing more recently. but I still like the Load album. And then Avenged Sevenfold, their self-titled album from back in 2007, before the last album that the Rev did, is another one that just has phenomenal songwriting and playing and performing all the way through. So another fantastic album. So okay, so Simon, I hope that one that's a long one in answer. I could have just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but okay. So let's go back to taking a look at this song. So getting a session set up here in the computer to go ahead and lay down the first part of the songwriting process. So the very first part, like we talked about, was coming up with the riff and going from there essentially. Now sometimes it'll flow out a lot quicker. Sometimes you kind of mess with it and come back to it and change it. I mean, I've changed the major parts of songs well into the recording process of getting to the point where I'm getting close to being done with the song. I've changed it because I ended up just something just didn't sound great to me. So so the initial part that I do as far as recording goes, and I'm not going to talk about gear or setup or anything like that. I will let you know that everything that I do is fairly simple as far as getting things recorded. I use basically on all of my releases that I've done, I've used one microphone, and that is for vocals. So guitars are all done using direct outs on either an amplifier or a processor. The amps that I've used, or the amp that I used on previous ones, had a lot of channels and settings and some effects built in. Processors are the same way, and those go direct into what I use for a recording interface. I don't use an external mixer or anything like that. So it's essentially a very small signal chain to get everything recorded in. So like I said, I keep it fairly simple so that I don't have to, it's just one less thing for me to worry about, because I've learned through the years of recording that learning to record music is essentially like learning another instrument. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice and things like that. So like I said, I keep it fairly simple. So first thing that we do as far as recording goes is determine the tempo, and I've already done that for this riff, and that's put into the session, and then I'm going to record what we call a scratch track. So this is going to be an unpolished roadmap for the song. It's just going to be laying it down so that everything else can develop around it, and then it'll be replaced. So we're not super concerned about performance or things like that. We're just trying to get everything in here and going so that we can start to develop the song more. So here we go with the riff that we got here. All right, so I'm kind of thinking for this one, and as I write the riffs and things like that, I kind of already start to plan out different ideas as far as where I want the song to go from there. So, I've kind of got this bluesy rock riff going, so I'm kind of starting to think through that after I write the riff. Okay, where can it go from here? What have I done before? Because I definitely don't want to, just repeat old songs or do the same thing that I've done, on past songs or records or whatever it is. So I want to try to keep it as fresh as I can, as different as I can from what I've done. So kind of like I was saying before, that riff, I don't personally like it for a verse, just simply because unless you're following along and singing the melody line and lyrics along with that, it would be, it's a little bit more difficult to sing and play the song at the same time. So I was kind of thinking with this one would be kind of a heavy groove, kind of a stop start chord progression. So let's pick it up from there and see what we got. So I think for the verse riff, I think that's a decent start. So it's definitely something that is groove heavy, it incorporates that initial riff. So I'm happy with it. I think I can work with it. And another thing not super important is that intro and verse riff, as long as it stays in that that same repetition or number of times, that's coming right in at around 30 seconds when we start to get in the chorus. So that's the old don't bore us, get to the chorus type of thing. Now, I'm not a big fan of putting rules on anything as far as music goes, but sometimes it's not necessarily one of those things where I go, hey, I've got to make the song this long. It can only be 3 minutes and 15 seconds, or I have to get into the chorus within the first 30 seconds. Mine is just, hey, the chorus, we got to the chorus in 30 seconds. People say they like that. I don't get it. Like I said, I think that music starts to decline and not be as fun when you start putting any kind of rules on rules are the thing that kind of squashes creativity as far as music goes. So all right, let's keep it going. So again, the thoughts that I had for where I want to go with the song. So we've got the initial riff, we've got the kind of chunky verse progression. So pop right into the chorus here. So I was kind of thinking with this one that it would be something that the melody line would kind of follow the guitar, and I was reminded of a song that Jeff Beck did called, I think it was called Going Down, but basically the melody line, or what was sung, followed along with the guitar part. So it was going down, 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 which I think is a cool thing to do. Some people, again, they don't like it, or they want to say it shouldn't do that. Again, more stupid rules. So I think that I kind of want to do that. For this one. So let's see how it kind of sounds together. We'll go with it. Okay. So I think there we go. As far as getting the initial stuff down now from here. So this this one's set up intro, verse, chorus, verse, and then I'll probably jump into another chorus. Um, like I said, I generally try not to put any rules on how it's going to be set up. Um, like I said, this is just kind of the scratch track on what to work with. So from here, there'll be a couple different things that I'll do, and I'll go into in future episodes. I'll talk about how I do the bass tracks and the drum tracks and different things like that. But as far as the work that will be done from this point is this piece of it will be I'll go ahead and send myself this recording via email, and it'll be the thing that plays in the car essentially over and over, and I usually will let the lyrics kind of and melody line kind of come from that as I'm just kind of sitting there and thinking about it. As I'm listening to the song, things will pop in, pop out. It may be something I can use, maybe something I can't. And that's kind of how the lyrics most of the time will develop. Now, some lyrics come together faster than others. There'll be times when I'll just be, and really it's the times that and this goes back to Colby's question, does it take you a while to write lyrics? They kind of come and go, and they really just kind of pop in, at least to get started. So a lot of the times it'll be, a word or phrase will pop into my head, words that rhyme, a saying or something like that. And then from there, depending on what that is, I'll try to determine if that's a topic that I can, build a song around, as far as something that I can either, reference something that's happened to me personally, or can, put myself in, someone who may have experienced whatever that is, put myself in their shoes, enough so to write a song and, make it something that's, relatable and that people can get into. I don't just write songs for myself. I write them for, everybody. So, the lyrical approach is not something that I try to force, too much. I will, in some cases, if I've got time, one example would be my song "You Won't Find Me." I had gone through this process that we just kind of went through, and was traveling, and had a couple of flights. So basically, I'm not driving, so I can type it out on my phone as I'm thinking about it, and kind of think of the melody in my head. And I wrote the lyrics to that essentially on a 3-hour plane ride. There's other songs like "Dear Today," off of my first record. That song was probably written and rewritten many times over 3 or 4 months. And I even was recording that song with a completely different lyrical approach to it. Different melody lines, different excuse me, different melody lines, different lyrics altogether. So, and then it came out how it did because I listened back to it and really I was just like, I'm just not getting into this, and I had to go back and do a rewrite of them. So, so it can take a while. It can come together really quick. Generally, I've got about 3 to 5 songs that are being worked at one time. So, I generally can't say, okay, I'm gonna, I've tried where I'm like, okay, I'm only gonna focus on one song. I'm not gonna, try to write, and it just doesn't work for me. So I usually have 3 or 4 different ones going at one time. So that way, if I do get stuck on one, I can go and work on another one, and things like that. So it just kind of depends. Back to questions. So Colby, she's my rock. What's your favorite song to play on the guitar? So there's so many, but I think I mentioned earlier. You know what? My favorite one to play on guitar is Joe Satriani's Satch Boogie. I can't play it very well, but I do like to play that one the best, probably. That's another one that, again, Satriani being my favorite guitar player, and with that one he kind of threw in a lot of the blues sounding stuff. So I mean, that was so just a lot of really cool riffs in that one. So that's probably my favorite one to play. All right. Moving on, more questions. Oh, feel free to comment with any questions that you have, any topics. Doesn't have to be about music. I'll talk about anything almost. Anything you'd like me to discuss on my future stuff, any topics or areas you'd like to cover, let me know. So my sister Amanda, she didn't have a question so much as a comment. She said she wanted to chime in and say, my brother is the most badass guitar player I've ever heard. On a second note, his beard and hair are on point. Rock on. And if you're curious, the brother she's referring to is me, not another brother or anything like that. So thank you, sis. Love you. And then my good buddy Russ, from Texas also. Me and Russ played together in a group called Echo of Insanity a few years back. Fantastic vocalist, fantastic guy in general. He asked, how much is this guitar worth? And I think he knows the answer is more than his soul. All right, y'all. I'm going to call it quits for our episode 1 of the Guitdiot Sessions. I hope everybody's staying safe during the COVID thing that's going on. Like I said, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out on social media. I'm at the Matt Massey on all the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My website is themattmassey.com. All of my music is available for streaming and download. My most recent single, Look and See, go check that one out. Let me know what you think. And we'll see everybody again soon.